Hello, everybody, and welcome to we're in May already. That is crazy to me, by the way. I don't know how everyone else feels about that. But welcome to the May Parting the Veil. My name is Minus, and as always, I am joined by our creative director, Chris Joppa Perkins. So, Chris, as always, thank you for being with us tonight.
It is my pleasure. Glad to be here.
He's like, I'm scheduled to be here and I have to because I signed up. No, I'm kidding. So first of all, for those of you, I always like to start with this because, it's the
That's not
beginning of
true.
the content. Yeah, I know. I like to start with the beginning of the content that, this is a design document, like deep theory discussion type of almost like a podcast, but we do it on Twitch with video and such. But that's what the point of this is. That's what Parting the Veil is all about. And we've done a lot of different topics at this point, Chris. We've been doing this for a little bit. We've talked about travel in the world. We've talked about adventuring. We've talked about a lot of things. Today, I'm excited. I say this a lot. I feel like I'm a broken record, but I'm going to keep saying it. I love classes. Everyone knows that by now. It's really what makes my heart beat when we talk about MMORPGs. And today, we're actually going to be talking about the healing classes, sort of how they're going to differ, just in details about them. And what's really cool about Parting the Veil as well is we do take questions from the community. So we have a few different questions tonight that we'll answer from the community as well. So yeah, Chris, me and you can talk forever. So there's no reason to delay or try to build on time. I think we just jump right into this. You good to go?
I'm ready.
All right. So, for those that haven't been following the game, or if you just haven't been caught up this month, we're going to be starting with talking about the Shaman. And I think that makes sense because in our last developer live stream this month, we did sort of like the 1 to 10 playthrough experience for Shaman. Shaman has undergone, I believe, a lot of changes. I don't say a lot of changes, a lot of tuning, a lot of getting it to, I think, where our testing community is really loving it. So, props to you, Chris, and everyone who works with you in the design team. So first, can you just, before we even get into like the depth of the Shaman, can you talk about like what it's been like working on the Shaman and where it's heading, like playing as a healer right now and where it's at, I guess?
Mm. What it's been like working on the shaman, where it's headed. Well, so I think a lot of you know that I play uh, cleric typically, or cleric like classes in my MMOs as a main. Um, but I love healing, and so I really enjoy working on the healers, thinking about healing and how how the healing experience can, like most things we do, how can we evolve that. Um, the shaman's been a lot of fun. It's gone through quite a few different iterations over the years. But I really like where it is now, and a couple of the key changes that we've made to the class is number one. I really wanted to lean really far into that focus on the overtime healing. And the way the kit was set up before with the hand line of spells, the hand of starting with the hand of Caius and kind of a line of upgraded single target direct healing. It had some cool synergy with the mantle line, which is kind of the main hot that the shaman has, mantle of mist, and then that graduates from there. Had some cool synergy with that, but at the end of the day, the shaman ended up the experience of the healing ended up feeling a little too close to where I was wanting the cleric to end up going with their direct healing. And so one of the main changes was getting rid of that direct healing line and then really kind of just fully abandoning things for that heal over time approach. But then the other change and the more significant changes and updates and evolutions the class has gone through has been focused on really landing on that support and utility side of the class. So that's looked like emphasizing their more unique buffs and debuffs. Unique meaning that they alone as shaman have them, not anything really shared by any of the other classes. So giving them some nice unique buffs and debuffs, and then kind of really stepping more into the potency of those debuffs, especially. So shaman being a formidable healer, but then also being able to, in that sense, I guess, kind of flex into more of a crippler, a debuffer for the group. And so I feel like it's landed them in a really nice place in terms of their desirability in groups, the buffs that they bring, but also gives them a little bit more to do, other than just healing. And most importantly, especially with the way it synergizes with the limited action set, it's designed to for situations where you have multiple shaman, for example, in the same group, that there's enough kind of frontline things for both of those shamans to do that are very critical to the group's success. So I really like where they're at. Yes, I think testing is proving that kind of the current mixture of what makes the shaman a shaman is feeling really solid. So I'm happy about that.
And I'll tell you, just to add in, because I've spent so much time, like when we put that video together and really digging in and asking a lot of questions about the shaman as I was going through it, it's amazing because you talked about that being able to have two shaman. And we've talked about this in the past many times about how you could potentially bring two classes and they still have because of limited action set, they can kind of give you maybe fill the same role, but have variance to where it's really neat to have two. With a shaman, you just brought that up. And I think I just want to say it's really cool for those of you who haven't got to play it yet, that you start feeling that by like level 8. Like it might even be before that, where it's like, okay, well, I don't have a lot of mana, but I can throw a bunch of dots on this thing and damage it. I can stand back and heal, or I could debuff stuff like crazy. But I probably can't do all three right now and still have mana to do my main role. So it's really, it's a fun experience, and I'm excited for more and more people to try that who are into the shaman. Now you brought up the damage over time, or no, I'm sorry, the heal over time, the HOTS, the mantle line. Now that's obviously time themed, right? I mean, I know is that, yes, it's a time-based thing, right? But one of the lore pieces of a shaman has really been that they're like these walkers through time. And I know that the lore, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think we can all say the lore of our classes is really a big part of like how they're designed and like fitting into like why they're in the world and what they possess. So in the past, we had seen some spells or heard about them that had a function of like time and space type of stuff. Are there more of that coming? Obviously, we're only looking at 1 to 10, so we know there's more spells coming. But could you hint to any of what that might look like, whether it's in a healing sense or just for the class in general?
You mean beyond like the
Beyond
heal over time?
Yeah.
That's funny.
That works though, right? Like we could totally cheese it and be like, well, their heals over time.
Yeah. Well, that's where I thought you were going at first, like in kind of a punny way, but then it seemed like you were saying legitimately like, well, their heal over time and their damage over time are kind of those time themed abilities. Are there any more? No, yes. So it's a little bit challenging doing that to the degree that I would like in an MMO format. Things like rewinding or fast forwarding time, or some of the really kind of fully embracing what that could look like as a mechanic. So the goal is really to try to be as representative as possible with that. And yeah, the amount of abilities that are themed that way at level 8 or level 10 are I don't know that I'm trying to think. I don't know if there are any actually that specifically really step into that time age walking theme. But as far as the overall arsenal, I mean, I'll give a few examples. One of them is Walk the Ages, and so that's an ability that allows you to kind of stamp a location where you're standing, and then within 30 seconds you can go really anywhere you want within the same kind of extended area. I mean, when the first thought of this idea and iteration of it was zone wide, essentially. So as long as you were within the same zone, you could. So now that we are zoneless, we're still talking about a pretty massive space, but that within 30 seconds you can at any point instantly translocate yourself back to that point in time where you place that mark. So that's one example. Hurry the Past is a good one. With Hurry the Past, I want to just mention in reference to the first response too, which is removing the direct healing from Shaman as an intentional design shift. But Hurry the Past is an ability that they get. I can't remember where I saw it in.
Later.
I think it's maybe level 20 even. But Hurry the Past is incredibly potent, because what it does is it takes all of the current hots that you have active on your targets, and when you use Hurry the Past, it immediately finishes the duration of those hots and directly heals the target for whatever healing was left on the hot, and then it refreshes that hot.
Oh wow, and a refresh. Holy cow.
Refreshes the hot, yeah. So it's a really powerful ability, and it does kind of give the shaman that kind of oh crap moment heal where they can do that really potent move, and then again kind of themed off their ability to, manipulate the time aspect of things. And there's a couple of other abilities, Gate of Forgotten Eras, and a couple of different abilities that really play on that theme. But you're also going to see it play a big role in their spirit companion, the spirit wolf companion or bear companion that they're going to have, and the quest for that, and then what that companion is capable of doing, and kind of how it intersects that lore theme for the class. So we're definitely going to be stepping more into that as we go along.
Awesome. So I love when I ask you this question, Chris, because we always joke about it after. In short form, what's your quick pitch on the shaman healing experience? Like, what, as a shaman healer, this is the means at which you're going to heal, and sort of what you're going to lean into.
I think shaman will resonate from the healing side of things. I think, heal over time spells have kind of a unique feel to them. And if you are someone that enjoys that, from a healer perspective, like, stacking heal over time abilities, and really, through your itemization of various things, pumping up your healing so that you see those ticking numbers get bigger and bigger, and then, the crits of the ticks and things like that. If you enjoy that approach to healing, where it's, more of kind of an upkeep approach to healing, and kind of more of a larger wash, that from a healer perspective, I think is what will resonate. I think beyond that, the ability to really debuff, cripple, step into more of that, like, you could call it like anti-damage forms of healing, where either you're slowing the target, or you're reducing the damage they can put out, or you're
slowing the input of damage, and you're enabling the healing input. So like they play off each other really well.
Yeah. I think that will be what draws those types of people maybe to that class.
Cool. Love it. Let's shift to Cleric. So Cleric has been in. We haven't really done a feature on a Cleric. I think people saw them when our streamer program kicked in, and got to see different groups playing and get to see different perspectives. Probably was the most that people got to see where the Cleric is right now. But I know, again, you've said it just a little bit ago, that your favorite class is Cleric in most games, and it's something you're very passionate about. So I know you've also now been, Shaman was completed a little bit ago, little touch-ups, but I know you've spent a lot of time on the Cleric as well. So what have you been working on most recently with the Cleric class?
Well, first and foremost, the goal has been to get direct healing in a good place. So your Cleric is in many ways kind of your staple traditional healer type. At least that's the direction in Pantheon that I'm taking with it. And kind of the first pillar or staple of that is, getting their direct healing to a place where it feels potent. It's, the difference between like a hot style healing, where you're seeing health bars that are kind of, always inching up and then inching down as damage comes in. And it's kind of that maintenance and upkeep side of healing. Whereas to use the, kind of like a classical MMO perspective, when you take something like a wizard who's able to really, more so than a melee DPS class, who's more kind of consistently and continuously whittling damage down, you get a wizard in there, and the nuke, you see that huge chunk of damage, huge chunk of life come off the target. In the same way, Cleric's really standing out from other healers in terms of how effectively they can chunk that health bar up. And so you're going to see Clerics, kind of that skill cap coming into place as you see Clerics learning timing, anticipating, damage ranges and dips in health, so they can really maximize how much health they can restore without overhealing. And the other really, so that's one piece of it. And that's a lot of what the work has been, is really finding that place and that balance between mana expenditure and healing, because of how powerful those single target heals are. But the other thing I'm excited about with clerics that's going to be a counterpart to that, well, two things really, is number one, their melee orientation. So they're not a melee DPS class, but the idea is to give clerics the fundamental tools, and then also through additional itemization allow them to, if they want to be more of the stand back and heal type, then that's very doable. But if you enjoy being more in the fray and you've itemized towards that, you have the gear for that, you will have the abilities to, depending on what your loadout is, to actually get up there and engage in melee combat with weapon techniques and then other class abilities that not only contribute to your mana upkeep, but then also contribute to your healing as well. One of the abilities in right now, Faithful Strike, which if you have bonded yourself with an ability called Vigilance, if you've cast Vigilance on a target in your group, and every time you use Faithful Strike, you're dealing a considered amount of damage with Faithful Strike as a melee ability, and then a good portion of that is going to actually directly heal the target that you've bonded with. So sorry, I'm realizing I've gone on Do Not Disturb.
I just figured, I figured all the clerics were just messaging you as you were talking about it. Like, Chris, what about this? Just a question. Right?
The other cool thing, this is a little bit of a bean, but if you've been around for a while, you remember the Celestial Aegis ability for the cleric, which is this big kind of massive ethereal shield that they can summon in place as a physical object in the environment. And as the cleric grows in power, those are going to become kind of more available to them, various sizes, various effects and types, but being able to manifest these physical shields that they can place in the environment to control, either the flow of enemies, to create, shields against projectiles and other things that come in. And so that's going to be kind of another way that they can lean into some of that anti-damage approach to healing. Instead of something just like putting an absorb shield on a target, they're actually going to be able to manipulate the environment to a degree by where they place these shields, what kind of shields they are, and things like that. And as they grow in power, being able to have more shields active and, kind of mixing a different combination of what those shields are will be a big part of that. The versus undead side of cleric is another one that we're kind of, I'm working to bring online more fully. And we may get to this in a little bit, but for each of the healer classes as well, I really want them to have their own kind of unique travel niche, like in how they support traversal and exploration and things like that. And so for the cleric, that's going to come in the form of endurance-based buffs and benefits. So whether that's, how large your endurance pool is, like how your endurance regeneration rate, things like that, but then also resilience. And so things like protection from getting knocked off a wall that you're climbing, or protection from getting knocked off of a mount, or things like that. That will be some of the places where the cleric will have their unique benefits that they can bring to the traversal side of the game as well.
That's awesome. So we're about to get into our first community question. And if you haven't seen the show before, if you're watching now or you're watching on demand or you're listening on our podcast version, one of the things we do is we source questions for every one of these Parting the Veils. So obviously I have my questions, but we want to really answer some of those questions in the community, provide clarity. So if everyone doesn't know, this is a very community themed show. It was kind of the idea from the get-go, because our community is what makes this game possible. Obviously, those of you that know us know that we're a crowdfunded game. You can check out pantheonmmo.com for pledge options. But the other part about being a crowdfunded game and community being important is that even just sharing things on social media, connecting with us on various social media. So that's kind of how we gain and get our questions. So one of the interesting things about clerics that we didn't talk about yet is that they have a special equipment slot item for their offhand. And I say this word wrong so much. It's my whole life. And I know, and I go to say it because I say the gravestone thing instead of tome, which that's right. I think I got it right. They have tomes that they'll have in their hand. And someone asked a great question. I'm going to pop it up on the screen here to give them their props. But this was on Reddit, and the user's Daka. They said, will clerics be forced to use a tome in the offhand for mana regen during combat, or could we see alternatives? And if you want to provide some clarity on that question too, just for people who may not be aware of what they mean by that.
Yeah, so lore-wise, clerics are as the lore would say, they're bound to the tomes of their order. So the celestial deities that the clerics have connection with, the sayings and the writings of those celestials are kind of what is bound up in this tome. And so from the tomes to the special class resource called Celestial Power, there's these places where we key off of that idea that their connection with these celestial beings is part of what empowers them. And so the tome is a representation of that connection that clerics bring with them into battle and essentially have with them. Now, where we're going to see, I think, a really cool step forward there is instead of the clerics having to physically equip that tome in the offhand, because, I mean, just to be honest, as a cleric fan, I love shields. I want to be able to shield.
Or a two-hander, right? They could possibly use a two-hander.
Yeah, yes. Not as effectively as a paladin, but yes.
Sure.
But the cleric, you know, in that traditional sense, a main hand weapon and a shield. And so this tome is going to kind of, instead of be something that you hold, it's going to hover. It's going to appear with you in combat. And so when you unsheath your weapons, as you enter into combat, that tome is going to appear and kind of have a nice little, you know, visual effect of it, you know, kind of with you in combat as a kind of that ethereal representation of it. And
awesome.
So yeah, I'll leave it at that until we can.
That's also something cool to look for.
Like a familiar in a way. It's not going to have collision. It's not going to be targetable. It's going to be a representation of the tome that you have equipped. And there's all different kinds of tomes that clerics can gain through just their class progression. But then there are tomes that you can quest for, the tomes that you can find, you know, as rare items, and they have, you know, myriad of different effects.
That went over well. The chat was very happy. That's going to be really neat. It's a neat call out. Look, there's a cleric, right? They have a really cool like tome floating. I love that kind of stuff. So that's cool. Awesome. Thank you for that question, Ducka Ducka. So as you did with Shaman, you went into a great detail there, but can you give me the short, you want to play a cleric, this is the type of healer you'll be.
Well, if you want to, so if the idea of being able to wade into, you know, close quarters combat is something that's attractive to you, you know, for me, a lot of times it's been the class identity of the cleric, the plate armor wearing, shield bearing, you know, that really resonates with me. So from a flavor perspective, identity perspective, and to a degree from that gameplay perspective of enjoying being able to be, at least have the option to wade into that melee combat, then that's part of it. Not that the other classes won't have that option, the druid and the shaman and whatnot, but for the cleric, you know, specifically as a very armored and fairly resilient character. If you like, you know, in the same way that I think, I'm not sure the mindset and kind of the wiring, people that gravitate towards healers versus people that gravitate towards DPS and whatnot, but I think, and so on some level, that the same kind of people that gravitate towards really heavy damage, you know, being able to have a much greater effect and much fewer actions, that I think will also resonate some with the cleric, just the raw healing, direct healing power that the cleric has, especially when you get to points in the game where health pools have become very large. The ability to really chunk that health up as a cleric is attractive. But also I think the mechanic with the shields is going to be a big one. I think, again, players that like to be involved more in the fray of things, where you're able to come up and literally put a barrier down in between your group or your tank or, you know, your wizard and kind of this imposing threat. I think that's I'm excited because I think it's going to feel really good. Really good.
I love it. So we got the management style healer, you know, upkeep and looking at like keeping stuff up, and you have the just brute force. That's all. I don't know if you know, I'm also a very big cleric style healer fan myself as a healer. So I think you got me beat on your love for them, but definitely like them. So, all right. You ready? Everyone in chat, what do you guys want to hear about? Are we done? Is that it? Is that the two healers?
I
I think that's it. Okay. Leaves one more dedicated healing class. One more. So you'd be surprised when I was going through the questions. Basically, it's funny. There weren't a lot of questions I could sit here and ask you. There were just tell me about the druid. That was a lot of them. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the druid. So can you talk about where design is at this point and what their focal point of the healing style is? And while you do, I'm going to put up the question I did decide to take. And don't worry, we're going to go in depth. But this seemed to sum it up. Random Rob on our forum said, will druids be fun to play? Because every other question wasn't a question. It was tell me about druid. So a lot there. Listen, I want to just give you the floor, except for where I may jump in excitement to kind of really go into the druid.
Cool. So the design philosophy for the druid is really the same that it's always been, and that is one of indirect healing. What I might add to that to kind of put a new spin on the same idea would be indirect healing and triggered healing, you could say. So an example of like when I say indirect healing would be the Verdant Fire tree. So the ability, so Verdant Fire, number one, is the name of kind of the druid's special manifestation of magical energy, Verdant Fire. So it's this emerald green flame that is, you know, part of what has been bestowed on them as this kind of druidic force and power that they wield. And so a lot of their healing and damaging abilities have this Verdant Fire kind of a look and a feel to them. So the Verdant Fire tree is an ability that causes this tree of, you know, emerald flame to kind of sprout up and be in a location, and your proximity to that tree for characters in proximity to that tree, they're going to be receiving constant periodic healing from that tree, from the source of that, and the closer they are to it, the more potent that healing is going to be. So this is some what I mean by indirect, in that you're placing these in this case, this spot, this location that you mark is going to serve as a source of healing for players in its vicinity. The flip side of that, the triggered, is, and I'm only going to give a couple of examples of each of these, but the triggered ones would be like Verdant Fire Seed. And so the Verdant Fire Seed is basically an ability that you cast on a target. And when they take a certain threshold of damage, it's absorbing damage. And then when they take a certain threshold of damage, then it's going to bloom and heal them for a certain amount. And so that one in particular is a little unique because it has that absorptive property, but then it ultimately, once it receives enough damage, then it blooms and heals the target. And so it's a great way to, you know, target that's getting low, put that on there, and then you got anti-damage, and then you've also got that kind of triggered effect where you can then turn and focus on other things. And a lot of the reason for the indirect and the triggered aspects of the healing is because the Hirode element, the fox, the white fox, which I want to mention this, and this has been something just from straight up community feedback that I think is important. We are going to make sure that there is a representation of this that fits the different races. So,
oh wow, that's a huge bean.
Yeah, it for the halflings, it's going to be, you know, the white fox. For ogres, for, you know, the other classes that can be druids, they're going to have their own kind of representation of what Hirode is. And there's even the possibility that that is something that, you know, we could allow unlocks for different visual representations of Hirode through quests and various things that you can unlock. But it's definitely because of how intertwined the class is with this entity that it makes sense to really allow for a lot of, you know, customizability there and things that really fit with the flavor of the races. But the reason for, and this is where the druid gets a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to do my best to kind of just give a little bit of a high level here. But you have your indirect healing and you have your triggered healing, because a lot of your attention is going to be on how you're utilizing this healing mechanic in Hirode. And so at the very most fundamental level is your essentially a healing auto attack, you could say. And so think of Hirode as, instead of a summoner or a necromancer, for example, sticking a pet on an enemy to attack it, you're now sending your pet. It's not a pet. And bear that in mind. It's not a true pet in the sense that it can't be targeted by enemies. It doesn't have a health pool, but it can be controlled. And so what I might do, I'll just kind of walk through a couple of scenarios. I've got my Verdant Fire tree that is, set up in this area, and it's doing its thing. I'm, using the Verdant Fire seed, casting Chrysalis, which is another one, which is basically a death save. So if I see that someone's gonna die and I don't have time to save them, I can pop Chrysalis on that target. They take a killing blow, wraps them up, and this Chrysalis protects them, and then after a few moments, it puts them back out at half health, and I have this long but very powerful cooldown in Chrysalis to kind of save somebody from death and kind of get them back in the mix. But what I might also do is, if I've got, let's say an off tank over here, I might put Hirode on that off tank just in a base form to essentially auto attack heal that group member. So that heal is triggering as Hirode is focused on that group member. Every so often it's triggering a direct heal. But the really cool thing about Hirode is that I can also kind of give it a few different commands and abilities that it does have that I have to combo with it. So, for example, I can tell Hirode to do, I don't have my ability sheet up in front of me to know what the names are, but I'll say, okay, I want Hirode to focus on this target in this way, and that's going to make my Verdant Fire Seed do this unique thing. Or I'm going to have Hirode focus on this target in this different way, and that's going to allow my damage, my Verdant Fire Spear damage ability, to now be able to actually use that directly on this target if Hirode is focused on it in this way. And so essentially I have this it's not a pet in the sense that I'm managing it, upkeeping it. It's not going to draw aggro. It's not going to die in an AE storm. But it's going to be something that I can utilize and manipulate on different group members to give myself the ability to respond differently to different healing needs. Or if I need to, I can just set it and forget it and kind of use it as a secondary auto attack healing kind of thing. The Druid is probably going to have a higher skill ceiling. I can say that, but I wouldn't say it to play it effectively. I would say it to play it optimally. And I think that's really the goal with as much as I can with our different classes. I want there to be, I don't want it to be so brutally hard to be able to be effective. But I want it to really be a challenge to be, optimal in your execution of these different classes. And the Druid is just that, because of the myriad of different options that you have to kind of set up combinations with yourself in these ways. The ability to heal effectively is very present and robust, but really, really good Druids, I think, who really master kind of the synergy they have. Yeah. Yes, it's going to be really potent class, class.
I think people want that. I think, it doesn't necessarily have to be this extremely difficult thing to be able to play at a base level. But if I play a class and I main a class for a long time, I want it to show that like I have a skill set from learning it and really digging in, and that's exciting.
Yeah. I don't know if we're going to get to the questions later that will allow me to talk about a lot of the support that the Druids bring as well.
Yeah, we can talk about that later. We'll talk about it in the comments. Yeah. So, okay, that was a lot. I think you kind of answered we were going to talk about Hirode. You went into that. I think you kind of gave the pitch there at the end. Like the healer, it's going to be a little more challenging, but you have a lot more tools at your disposal. You're managing these. So I'm going to let you off the hook for the sales pitch part of that. Sure. We're going to get back to the healing classes themselves in a little bit. But one of the things we've talked about in the past is as we continuously online abilities from these classes, as they're getting refined, we are also, in a sense, refining the ability of our NPCs. And you've talked about this in the past a lot. And so we actually had a question from Reddit. Let me pop it up on the screen. Can you talk about enemy healers? And, with some of the stuff you've talked about with what our NPCs are going to be capable of doing, what we can expect on how they'll function against a group and some of the things players might have to look out for.
I mean, on a higher, like, conceptual level, we want I want our NPC healers to be capable of turning the tide, just like player healers are, in a sense. So what does that mean? That means, players turn the tide when they make smart healing decisions, when they recognize the play and make it. So that's one area where NPC healers, in kind of a unique way, have the ability, in the NPC sense, to really turn the tide of a fight. And I guess another way to look at it is disruptive. So the other cool thing about healers from an NPC sense, and really from a player sense as well, is they have pretty deep roster of utility. And a lot of times those utilities can be very disruptive. They can come in the form of a stun. They can come in a root. They can come, in a lot of debilitating debuffs and things like that. And that's obviously not the only source of NPCs or of those types of abilities from NPCs. But when you couple that with our NPC tactic layer, and you couple the goal of an NPC healer to heal their allies and their ability to utilize utility and disruptive effects, and then you marry those two together and say, okay, I need to make sure I get this heal off. So how do I do that? I do that by using a disruptive ability to create the window for myself to heal, that kind of a thing. So I think the best way to answer that would be in how much we are able to turn that knob of intelligence a little bit. It's not actually intelligence. It's not intelligence going on, but it's the appearance of intelligence because of the targeting logic and the different things that they're able to sniff for and watch for and react to. And then understanding, because of how deep we can set up those conditions, what kinds of abilities they would use synergistically to create those openings and do that tide turning. The other little snippet is just we want them eventually to have the ability to revive. So NPC healers being able to revive, their fallen allies would be a big part of that as well.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. That's cool. Going to another community question. And I like this one a lot. I don't know we can give a complete answer on it. I mean, I'm not going to doubt you, but it's a cool question. Do we see that different healers may have better synergies with different tanks, or do you think it's more player based?
I definitely think it's more player based. I mean, that's one of those things where we've talked about a few areas like this before in the past. It's difficult as a developer to foresee a lot of that stuff, and I think it's dangerous to try and
make it happen.
Direct that kind of thing. So what I would the spin I would probably put on that is that I think probably the different healers generally would have different kinds of synergies with tanks. Not so much that this healer synergizes with this tank and then this healer synergizes with this tank, but more that the way that each healer synergizes with tanks as a whole would be somewhat unique. I think to some degree, I think druids will probably be the best general fit with all of the tanks. I think the cleric and paladin will have an amazing synergy just with the undead stuff. And then I think in general, where positioning is really key, I think clerics will have some really unique things with their shielding to bring to the table. If I had to pick one for shaman, I'd probably say Dire Lord, just because of the attack speed mechanic and how well Dire Lords scale with attack speed. their essence generation. Um,
Then some of their
so
own self healing and stuff too that ties nicely into
yeah,
like the
talks
hot
to the
healing.
healers
Yeah,
and things. Exactly. And Shaman have a really nasty critical hit buff, Primal Fury, that gives them a base crit chance increase, and then every time the target critically hits, it increases that bonus up to a pretty high degree. So while it lasts, by the end of it, you've got some nice crits happening. So again, I think there's some pretty cool synergy there with some of the specific classes, but not in any case so much that it would just be we always pair this healer with this tank kind of a thing.
Awesome. I like your comment of it's not something we even want to design specifically, and we want to see how it sort of plays out, because I think that's the cool thing about these games. We design some ideas, and then the world and becomes a world, and we see really cool things happen. So, okay, so sort of a bigger question here, and we've actually talked about this a little bit before before the stream. It's a big question. It's not easy to answer. This is from Reddit, Bison ST. Let me get this thrown up here. Oh, wrong one. Actually, I don't think I have the graphic for it. My bad. But this is Bison ST. He says, he as a healer's spell book evolves, how's the gameplay going to evolve? Like for a healer, someone who's healing.
Well, I think there's a couple of key ways, and you can say this to a degree probably for most of the classes, but I think it's interesting to think about it in light of the archetypes and what it means for them. So, for example, the first way I would say gameplay evolves, and then it would be in survivability. The growing and increasing ways that the healing classes will be able to protect themselves and others from death, to be able to prolong encounters, to be able to allow for resets and repositioning. And I think that sense of survivability that comes with the way our healers will progress is going to be, I think, pretty significant. And when you factor that in again with the way we're trying to build a game that really holds out and offers such an extensive palette of exploration, and doing so in a way where even as a player on your own, you have incentives and reasons to go and explore and things like that. I think survivability and your ability to survive longer and more effectively in various scenarios and places is a big part of that. The other one is similar in some way, but I would say adaptability as well, and the ability to respond to different challenges, the ability to in some ways uniquely as an archetype allow for groups to do more kinds of things because of what you're capable of as a healer. I think is going to be a big part of the draw of how those classes uniquely evolve. And then I think there's the solo ability aspects, for those times where you want to just kind of go out on your own and do some things, as the classes evolve, their ability to effectively deal damage in those kinds of situations. We want all of our healers to have a relatively formidable damage dealing kit, not certainly on the level of a dedicated DPS class, but we don't want any of the healers to just feel like that's all they can do. So that'll be really nice to see how that evolves, and again, that kind of opening up more of the world to you as a healer.
It's safe to say too, like, because we've talked about it recently, that we're going to have downranked spells for certain things. So as you are expanding your pool of spells, even if you're getting more expensive or bigger ones, there's some strategy to potentially look at how you potentially play with downranked skills. There's probably, I'd imagine, gear as you're leveling, you're getting more epic or cooler gear that enables maybe more power, and how you gear is important. And I think the third one, like tanks, right? So it's the tanks evolving, is going to give the healer more time to do different things potentially, or think of ways to do things differently. And then the DPS having a little more survivability when they're standing in fire and stuff. So it's I think everybody sort of grows together, right? And then that adds to the versatility you're able to do too. So
sure, yeah, absolutely. And I didn't go into those things because I was thinking more specifically about the healer archetype uniquely. But yeah, I mean, the itemization, the synergies that the different classes have with one another. Meaning, yes, as everyone evolves, the overall evolution that's happening for a group, for a handful of adventurers together who are able to synergize in new and different ways. Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal.
Awesome. So the next question here, and this is a tough one. This I actually flashed it up. This is from Facebook from Joe Castillo. How will Pantheon avoid mandatory healing classes regarding certain challenges? I will preface this. Like, I think one of the examples he used in that post or in the discussion was just to kind of like lay a baseline for how to even approach something like this. Is like, I think EverQuest in particular with shamans, or not shaman, cleric in the complete heal, like being just like you had to have them and you had to have a complete heal rotation. So like that kind of sets the stage a little bit for where the question was, but I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, you know, I'm not looking for a complete heal chain walk down memory lane. You know, I think
you have scars from that one yourself.
it just wasn't fun. It wasn't fun for me. And you know, it may have been the highlight for some people, but I think in that regard, giving something like complete heal to only one class, and then having that one class, then not even just one of that one class, but then having to have an army of that one class, all just kind of, you know, that's definitely not something we're going to see. And not just really in any scenario. I will say that certain like archetypes maybe will have, or maybe let me rephrase that. You may have something like a druid and a summoner who are able to form a bridge and create a way to cross a certain area. You may have something like, you know, the warrior with the battering ram ability that's able to, you know, open up a section of a map that you know, no one else could, or something like the shaman who's able to shrink you know, the group to get kind of into an area that you couldn't get through any other way. But the point is that that's not going to be the only way to achieve those things. That will be one way, and it's not that there's going to be such a myriad of ways that it's all trivialized. But if you just can't get a hold of a druid or a summoner, and you need to cross a gap that's otherwise uncrossable, then you either are going to need to get to the point where you're able to maybe get higher elevation and glide across. You're going to have to get to the point where you know, you're able to find an item, and therefore, you know, make sure that your group has gotten their hands on an item that will allow you to cross that. So the boots 5 feathers, for example, that allow you to, you know, maybe hover enough of a distance as you run off a ledge to make it to the other side, or at least fall forward close enough to the other side where you can grab the ledge and climb the rest of the way up. So no, we're not looking for you know, ways to literally create, you know, stop gaps of one particular class, and then if you don't have that, then you're out of luck. Now that being said, I think the other side of this question is geared more towards, like we were discussing beforehand, you know, I think a lot of it comes down to the concern about balance, and are you going to end up with a class not so much because of a very specific ability, but more so if clerics end up just being, you know, the superior healer, then are you going to want to bring a druid, or are you going to want to bring a shaman? And I would say, with absolute knowledge, but I would say I'm pretty certain that no developer intentionally wants to balance their classes in a way that only one of them is viable if they have several in an archetype. Our goal is, to make sure that there's enough parity between the healers that you're not going to have situations where only clerics or only shaman or only druids are viable. Now, we're not going for surgical precision. We're not going for parsing that, is within, a couple of
points,
decimal place of each other. And there will be, like we've always said, there will be certain classes that at certain times in certain situations are superior, just because of the situation, the context, and the toolkit. But the goal is that it would not be so much so that only that class is viable.
Superior, but the other classes are still viable. Yeah, that's important.
Absolutely.
I love it. I think you answered that amazingly. Thank you, sir. It's good. So the next question here, I'm going to preface a little bit before we put the question up. But so in Pantheon, it's safe to say our class's main role is the main gameplay you can expect from them, right? Like if you're a warrior, you're a tank. Now, does that mean you can do other things and you have some flex? For sure. But we believe hard in the fact that the main role of class is what that class is going to be designed to be great at. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So, but we don't shy away that, some classes are going to have maybe a smaller flex kit, or maybe through gearing, like can do some other cool things if their group allows them to. And we kind of hinted at that with the shaman a little bit, right? Like there's value in bringing 2 shaman to a group. Even if you only need 1 healer in some fights, there's going to be value to having 2 different kitted out shamans, even from a gear standpoint, from a limited action set standpoint, all that stuff. So this question is an amazing question. This actually comes from our forums, and it's from Brutenga. And they just said, could you just briefly discuss each of our 3 healers' flex role capabilities, or where we see them flexing outside of healing?
Yeah, I think I've kind of hinted at those a little bit already. And, with the healers, because they have such a deep arsenal of support and utility abilities intrinsically, I think in that way, I don't think of them as flexing in the same way as I would say like a rogue being able to flex into a lesser, a less effective control role for a period of time, or a monk being able to flex into an off tank role for a short period of time. In a way, the healing classes are kind of their flex is always on, I guess you could say, because in every fight, they potentially have the ability to bring these utilitarian abilities to bear on their target and on the encounter. So in the case of the shaman, again, you've got one shaman that's dedicated and focused on healing. The other shaman is may not even have a heal on their bar. They have only damage dealing abilities, debuffs, and things of that nature, where they can really be more in the offensive slot towards the target. And even if there's only a single shaman, the ability through the loadout to kind of choose like a hybrid, for example, of healing abilities and debuff and more crippling type things, to I guess flex in that sense into that role of a crippling class. And I think the part of this that's so important to stress, and I really, really want to stress this because it's a really big part of the DNA of what we're excited about with the game, and really kind of leaning more into these classic, more traditional approaches to MMOs, to nonlinear item progression, and all kinds of things, is that through the host of the itemization in the game, your ability, not only through what abilities do you have on your loadout, but through itemization to reinforce that focus, is also a part of the flex. So to shift back to the rogue for an example, if I really, if we don't have an enchanter, or we don't have a necromancer, or we don't have, a class that is capable of more significant forms of control, then or a bard for that matter, then what are we going to do? Well, I, as a rogue, can do some of these things, but I'm just not anywhere near as capable. But if I itemize specifically for it, because part of flexing in the traditional sense when I've used it typically is that you're also sacrificing something for the role of doing that. So a rogue is not going to be able to like maintain top tier DPS while they're also flexing into the control form. But you take that a step further and say, okay, I really need to focus on control for this fight, so I'm going to itemize for it as well. I'm going to find items, I'm going to find relics, I'm going to find different things that I can equip that actually improve the abilities that I use to do that flex. So smoke trick and some of the other traps and different things like that. Yeah. So in the same way with the healers, part of flexing into that support and utility role is also how you itemize what kind of bonuses you have on your equipment, things like that.
Love it. So you talked about Shaman being debuff, some damage. We didn't talk a lot about the Druid flex. Did you want to give any? You talked a little bit about like the bridge. Did you want to give any more little Druid flex things? So we talked about the cleric can kind of get in and do some melee damage, right? And even
melee damage, do a lot of that anti-damage, work through their shielding. For druids, it's the aspect system, and so I think of a good way to present this. I might regret using this as a as an example.
Wait, do we need to put like what is being the Pantheon is in development and things can change?
Oh yeah. Things may change over time.
I need to make like a thing that pops up on the screen. Like, when do we need to do that?
Yeah. So, if you look at our crafting system, for example, you have the ability through the way that David is designing that system is through dusts and other rare components that you get as you're gathering. You can utilize those in the crafting process to actually dictate what stats do I want to focus, what stats do I actually want this thing that I'm making to yield when it's finished. So what the aspect system is for the druid, and I hesitate to call it a system because it's not like a fully fleshed out standalone gameplay system kind of a thing, but the idea is that the druid would have more than the other support classes control over what they can buff and what they can improve and how, by essentially leveraging again that class flavor of their affinity with the entire kind of natural landscape of Terminus, flora, fauna, and then even kind of more of the essential elements of the planet and the manas and the different energies and things like that they can they have such a powerful tap into those streams to then channel that through these aspects in a way that allow them to not only buff unique things. So you're talking about things like breath control and swim speed and other very unique traversal elements that you would find out in the natural world with how things underwater can swim better than things that live on land, and being able to tap into those aspects and then imbue them into other entities. So it gives them a pretty wide range of things that they can buff, even things like jump height, and other things that you just wouldn't think of as kind of intrinsically, as you don't get like a class ability that lets you jump higher necessarily, but a druid can actually improve that aspect of your character and the physiology of your character. So again, I don't want to go too deep into that, but sure. That's another area where I think you'll see druids and that, and just their play with lightning, which again, I'm not going to go too far into weather and
drop it out there for everyone getting excited. Weather and lightning. Okay. Yeah. We were joking. we could talk about that. Like, see, this is what would happen if I was in class designs. This is why I'm not. But like, what if we had like 1 in a 3 million chance you might get struck by lightning, but if you do, your druid's like 300% more powerful than everybody forever, right? Like you'll be like the only one. Oh, I got struck by lightning. No, I'm kidding. We were joking about that and laughing before the stream.
Yeah, but the catch though is you become a mountain, like you become a permanent fixture. In the
everyone has to bring the mobs to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so listen, I think a lot of our fans should be really happy with tonight. You've said a lot of things that people like to hear, and I love that you were saying summoner, and then you said necromancer, and then I saw you realize I didn't say bard. I better say bard because the chat was like he didn't say bard. So this next one is going to make a couple more people happy. So this is from our forums as well. Our last community question from Dougbug. Dougbug would like to know how classes like Ranger, Paladin, etc. that actually have heal functionality, are they able to flex into a healing role, or how will they compare to dedicated healers?
Yes and no. No, in the sense that what a healer is capable of doing when healing is critical. Something only a healer can do. You're not going to see a paladin or a ranger be able to flex into like main healing themselves, or keeping an off tank up, kind of a thing. And the difference between, like, for example, if someone's looking at it through an EverQuest lens, let's say, where the ranger and the paladin got just lesser forms of the healing that the cleric got or the druid got, kind of thing. And in that sense, druids and shamans got lesser form for a while of what the cleric got overall. It's not really going to be like that. The paladin healing, for example, is going to be, there's going to be a couple of shared abilities that clerics and paladins have, but then paladin with Oath Flame and a couple of different specific abilities that they're going to have are going to be uniquely paladin heals. They're going to be different in effect and mechanic, and certainly less potent than what a cleric can do. And same with the ranger, and I would say even more so with the ranger. Our ranger is really more of like a like an archer skirmisher type of a class. It's not riding that same druid line that you might think of when you think of a ranger. So they will have some healing abilities, but not anything like what they'd be able to turn
very
around.
Different flavor than being a low-key druid.
Yep.
I like that. Cool. Do we think paladins are gonna have lay on hands?
Oh yeah, definitely they will.
I just threw that in at you. I wasn't sure. Like, why did you ask that? Okay, so that's a cool one. Okay, so that's a lot of cool stuff. I had a lot of fun tonight, and the chat was lighting up. So I could see you're smiling. You're having a good time. This is a good party in the Vale tonight. So we've covered a lot. We're past the hour. Obviously super excited about all this stuff. Do you have anything in particular you'd like to kind of close with or discuss to end tonight's stream, or last thoughts on Pantheon healing or anything we've discussed tonight?
I did see a lot of questions come through about Druid DPS, and that's kind of why I hinted at the lightning side of things, that Druids will definitely have some pretty crazy forms of DPS. Again, as a dedicated healer, they're not going to be topping the DPS charts with dedicated DPS classes. But if really all of the healers, I really want them all to have the ability to flex into more of a spurt based DPS role if they choose. I hesitate to say role, but
almost like moments where they can lend a hand.
Yeah. I mean, if you fill out your loadout with DPS oriented abilities, and again, like I said, if you've gone through the time to kit yourself and itemize yourself for that, then you can, with any of the healing classes, achieve some pretty formidable DPS. Not on the level of a dedicated DPS class, but certainly formidable, and probably more than you would expect, at least from like I guess what you see in other games of this ilk.
And and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but talking about how a healer is going to have that, you talked about just they're going to be, it's not necessarily changing their role, like it's a part of their role. Like healers are going to have an expansive, strong kit that's healing and supportive and, what, depending on the class. What's kind of cool about that, Chris, is if you look across the MMO RPG atmosphere since day one, sometimes games have a tough time having healers to find. But if you're going to make a healer that in depth and have like this high level potentially that they can get to, that could be something that hopefully solves that issue of really struggling to find healers, because people are going to want to play these classes because they're going to have more to do than stand there and look at a bar, right? And I think that that's happened a lot in some of the MMORPGs. So that's exciting. So Chris, thank you. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing so much information from the design. And I know some of these classes are a little bit off, but you guys, hopefully everybody can see how well thought out things are. It's more of an implementation and time thing. And just making sure, we've talked a lot. We want the classes that are in now. We don't want to just skip past them to put a new class in. We need them to function right, because when we put a new class in, we want it to function right with right functioning classes. Now that's saying a lot of the same words, but it's important. If classes aren't good that are in, and you bring a new class in, it's going to just cause a ripple effect of not a good feeling. So, so Chris, again, thank you. It was incredible talking to you tonight. Thank you to the community. Thanks to everybody who's lighting up chat. Thanks to everybody who's submitted questions tonight. Again, Parting the Veil is a very discussion based. We have a lot of fun with this, with the community, very community focused. And again, we just want to say thank you for everyone who supports us by sharing our content on social media, following us on social media, or checking out our pledge options on pantheonmmo.com. So until next time, and just a teaser, next week, you guys will get the newsletter, a little update on our path to alpha. So check out the website next week for that. So thank you, everybody. And Chris, once again, thank you. And everyone have a great night.
I'm running upward, everybody. Thanks so much.